Hello, my learning friends, and welcome to Hughes History. Today, we're going to investigate the very interesting question, can a president be indicted, constitutionally speaking, of course? Now, in terms of context, of course, President Trump is being looked at right now because he was kind of named as a co-conspirator by Michael Cohen when he pled guilty to interfering with the election by violating campaign finance laws. And we also have Alan Weisberg, who's the CFO of the Trump Organization, who's been granted immunity, and David Pecker, the CEO of the National Enquirer, has been granted immunity. So there's definitely an investigation. So this question has been coming up. So the short answer is I don't know. And that's why we're going to give both sides of the story. There's been no direct Supreme Court precedent or ruling on this issue, and it's really not come up too much in American history. So what say us? Let's do it right now and go giddy up for the learning and see if we can't grow our brains together. So we're going to do the no first because it's pretty straightforward. Now, we do have some precedent. In 1973, when they were investigating Watergate, there was a 71-page memo that was written about this topic, and in 2000, another long memo written in terms of the Whitewater investigation. And what the Justice Department ruled, because they're the ones that are the branch that would interpret the living Constitution as they see it, because there's no Supreme Court ruling, is that he should not be indicted. They didn't go as far as saying they couldn't, but the guidelines right now say no, we're not going to do indictments of a sitting president for the following reasons. Number one, it's called the Unitarian executive approach, a very expansive view of the presidency, where it's seen as the president's being the chief law enforcement officer. Therefore, they can't indict themselves. That would be like punching yourself in the face. And number two, they've basically said, what a pain in the neck for the country would that be? We don't really want to go through that nonsense, so let's just do what the Constitution does say we can do, which is if it's that much trouble, let's impeach and remove the president, and then they would have to face trial and they could be indicted and they go to jail. Now, the only real example that we have even close to this was President Nixon. Of course, he left office. He probably would have been indicted, but he was granted a pardon by President Ford, and that kind of put a squash on the conversation right there. So that's basically it. Expansive view of the presidency. It's a pain in the neck, and that we really should be focusing, if you want to get rid of the president, on the constitutional language of impeachment and removal. So that's the answer for the no's. Let's take a look at the more complicated answers for the yes. So there's multiple arguments for why people say the president can be indicted. The biggest is that the Constitution doesn't say they can't. Now, the Constitution goes as far as giving immunity to congressional leaders when they're in office or they're traveling back and forth. So if the founders wanted to give the president immunity, they would have done it, and they didn't do it. That's the argument. The second falls really on Nixon versus U.S., which is the Supreme Court ruling that the president is not above the law. And considering that the statute of limitations for most federal crimes are 5 years, if the president, serves 2 terms, that would mean that they would be above the law. They would never have to face justice for crimes that they committed while in office. Now, one of the other arguments goes to another Supreme Court precedent. This is Clinton versus Jones, which basically says that the president can have to give a deposition. The president can be involved in some type of civil lawsuit. And of course, this led eventually to Bill Clinton's impeachment. So in terms of Supreme Court precedent, they're kind of leaning in that direction. Now, in terms of the pragmatism of whether it could actually happen, technically the answer is yes, it could happen. Now, while the Justice Department has these guidelines that say you shouldn't indict a sitting president, those guidelines could be changed by the Attorney General. Robert Mueller, who's investigating the president, was appointed because of a 1978 Special Independent Counsel law. And according to the language in that law, they are supposed to follow the guidelines, but under extreme circumstances, they could ask the acting Attorney General to override that and indict the president. That would be Rod Rosenstein, who's the acting Attorney General in the Mueller probe. And once again, addressing the argument that it would interfere with the president, people that are proponents of indictment say, well, there is an escape clause there. If the president is actually serving his oath to the Constitution, or her oath, what they would do is they would go to the 25th Amendment and they could temporarily appoint the vice presidents who run the nation during the hassle of a trial. Trial would be much faster than impeachment and removal if you don't want to interfere with the business of America. Remember, the Clinton impeachment and trial, that lasted for months and months and months. Paul Manafort was found guilty in 3 weeks. It is going to interfere, but let's do it fast and let's do it furious. But the main argument comes down to the idea of justice. Is the president above the law? And the idea for some people is that if a president can interfere and commit felonies to screw with an election and get elected, and there is no justice and the statute of limitations runs out, that just doesn't seem like the right thing. That's the main argument. But there is a yes, and there is a no, and there is you, the person watching this video, with an opinion. So why don't you leave it down in the comments below? Let's battle it out Americana style and see if we can't come to some kind of compromises or understandings, because Americans are supposed to do that and such. All right, if you haven't subscribed, I don't even know I'm looking you through my camera anymore. And you can follow us on Twitter @HipHughes and visit the website www.hiphughes.com. You can get into the video arsenal. We have over 500, maybe 600 videos, and they're all organized in little neat like online sock drawers and such like that. That's all I got for you. I'm going to say, because I say it at the end of every lecture I've ever done, where attention goes, energy flows, and we'll see you, my learning friends, next time you press my button.